Good morning. Welcome to the first LEA Special Education Point of Contact monthly webinar for the 2017-18 school year. Hooray! My name is Annette Thacker-Bartlett, and I am part of the OSSE Division of Elementary, Secondary, and Specialized Education. And I also have collaborated with the OSSE Division of Data Assessment and Research, and they are on the line today to assist in answering questions as they arise. So throughout the webinar, please type your questions into the question chat box. We will do our best to answer them as we go along, but in case we do not, we will stay on the line for a few minutes afterwards to address outstanding questions, or we can follow up with you with an email at a later time as well. Today we're going to talk about data privacy and access to SEDS. It's the beginning of the school year, so there's some housekeeping items with SEDS that you will need to perform as one of your responsibilities as the LEA SE POC. Then we're going to talk about how to get your hands on those SEDS records for new students coming from another LEA. This is the time of year when things get crazy. Students are coming, there's hopping all over the city, and any delay in getting those SEDS records could mean a delay for that student to receive services. So we want to give you some pointers there. And over the summer, while you were sleeping or vacationing or working or at the beach, however you spent your summer, very minor updates were made to SEDS to make it more user-friendly, and I will review those with you today. Then a few reminders about how to train your related service providers to log things correctly in SEDS, which will then prevent a whole host of issues down the road with reports and compliance and Medicaid and all those things. So we're going to talk about how to get them off on the right foot this year when they log services. Then there'll be a few reminders about child count, as well as a few other announcements and reminders. Now, before we get started, I would like to see who is in our audience. Here is a very quick poll question. What is your current role relating to the LEA Special Education POC? Have you been the POC for a while now? Are you a new POC? Are you a supporting POC, maybe over a certain campus, or you assist the main POC with a lot of duties and that's why you've joined in today? Or perhaps you're a school leader or some other type of support staff that still benefits from the information in this webinar. 5 more seconds to take the poll question. Okay, thank you. And it looks like 78% of you are experienced POCs. So welcome back to another year. 17% of you are newer to this role, and 6% of you are not the main POC, but supporting. Wonderful. Okay. So let me also remind you, for those of you that are new as the LEA Special Ed POC, I strongly recommend that you attend this Friday's training, unless you already came to this training earlier in the month or earlier in the summer. For those of you that are experienced POCs, you are also welcome to attend this training or attend certain parts of this training on Friday if you would like a refresher or the opportunity to ask some questions. However, the content is geared towards newer special ed POCs. We've had a mix of new and experienced POCs attend the last few sessions, and it's led to some really great conversation and opportunities. If you want to come to all of it or any part of it, please RSVP by sending me an email as soon as possible so that we can account for you in Friday's training. And I will send you more details once you RSVP. Okay, data privacy and access to SEDS. Here we go. Personally identifiable information, PII. This is a term that comes from FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, that is very specific about what you can share or not share with others, very sensitive student data. Any data that can identify a specific student should not be shared except when necessary and according to data privacy policy. Of course, within your school among staff, there are times when you need to share the student data, but just think twice before you share it with somebody. And please never, ever, ever email personally identifiable information for students to OSSE. We have two other ways for you to share sensitive data with us, either the OSSE support tool or OSSE's secure file transfer protocol. And if you'd like to read more about data privacy or learn how to gain access to this secure transfer site or instructions for how to use it, the link at the bottom of the slide will take you there. Okay, a user audit. I bet every single one of you work at an LEA where there has been some staff turnover. There's a former special education teachers or related service providers or former LEA SE POCs no longer working for the LEA who should no longer have access to sensitive student records within your LEA's SEDS site. It is up to you as a POC to do some housekeeping and clean up that user list. Now, we never, and the people you need to look for is former employees, or current employees who no longer need to access those student files. Maybe they have a change in their role. And also non-public users. Non-public users are not your staff. However, several of them have access to your student files. So you also need to get in touch with the non-public programs and verify which staff and service providers still need access to the student files. And here is a quick tutorial on how the easiest way I can think of for you to do that user audit. So step 1, go into SEDS, open up the Users tab. Step 2, let's filter the list. Now, a word of caution. Because you are the LEA data administrator in SEDS, you do have the ability to control any user's access to your students. That includes OSSE state level users. Please do not ever change the settings or profiles for state level SEDS accounts. If you pull up a full list of users, you will see many, many names you do not recognize that are actually OSSE employees who also have access to your SEDS sites depending on their job role. So please uncheck those boxes, and then you can easily do a search to see all the other staff. And you can delete a bunch at the same time. Just in the left-hand column is the delete column. You're not actually deleting the files. You are inactivating the user accounts. They are not gone forever. They are simply removed from active list and put into the inactive list. So if that staff member comes back next year and needs to use SEDS again, you can actually reactivate their account. So here I have pulled up a list of all my users. You can sort by grade or school or title or last name or whatever. Just by clicking at the top of the column, it will resort the list. Check the box for those you would like to inactivate, and then click Inactivate Selected Users at the bottom. Now, if you want to reactivate them, in the School System tab, because of your user role in SEDS, you have the ability to access the list of inactive users. And so if there's someone you inactivated by accident, you can bring them back to life using this feature here. So we appreciate your help in protecting the privacy of student data by ensuring only current staff members and non-public staff who need access to your students can access your students. Okay, now let's talk about non-public staff. So for those of you that have students at non-publics, or those of you that do not, you may have a student be assigned to attend a non-public campus at any point. You will need to grant access to that non-public staff member to see your students that attend their school in SEDS. Now this is tricky because people from the non-public SEDS point of contact or some other person at the non-public is going to come to you, and this is going to happen because it always does. They're going to come to you and they're going to say, please create me a SEDS account. Don't do it. Never, ever, ever create a SEDS account for a non-public staff member. OSSE is the one that creates the account because they will need an aggregate account. An aggregate account is one central login where they can access multiple LEA SEDS sites. Now, OSSE is not going to give access to your students. We're just going to set up the accounts for them. So if a non-public comes to you asking for an account, like, hey, we have a new speech pathologist, she needs a SEDS account, can you create her a SEDS account? You say, I could, but I won't because she needs a SEDS aggregate account. Please go ask OSSE and then come back to me later. So the non-public SEDS POC needs to go to the OSSE support tool to make that request. Then once they have an account, now they come back to you and say, okay, Sally, the speech provider, she now has a SEDS account and can access your LEA. Please grant her access to your students. Now this is your job. You control who sees your students. OSSE controls the overall SEDS account for non-publics. So once they have a SEDS account, you should be able to look them up in your under your users tab. You just type in their name and their profile will pop up. Under their profile, you need to very carefully decide which campus box to check. Never, ever, ever, ever check the box for your LEA campuses if this is a non-public staff member. Otherwise, you will grant them access to all your students at your campuses. They only should have access to your students attending their campus. So here's an example where a staff member from Children's Guild who has students from E.L. Haynes should only have the Children's Guild box checked under schools, even though the students are from E.L. Haynes. And I would not check the E.L. Haynes campus boxes for a non-public member. If you have any questions about this, you can submit them through the OSSE support tool, or you can reach out to us. Okay, now let's troubleshoot. This always happens at the beginning of the year. The service provider is like, oh, I can't see my students in SEDS. And perhaps their SEDS POC has already asked OSSE to set up an account, but for some reason they still cannot see the students. So they're going to come to you and you're going to need to troubleshoot with them. Here are some steps that I recommend you go through just to double check everything in the case that a non-public staff cannot see your students even though they have a SEDS account. So the first thing I would do is you should go check with your registrar, your data manager, just double check to make sure in the student information system that the non-public campus is selected as the students attending campus. And after you confirm that, make sure the non-public staff member's profile has their campus box checked under schools, just like we talked about on the previous slide. Then make sure that user profile has the right title. Their user type in SEDS does matter. If they're going to log services for behavior, for example, or speech, they need to be that user type, and you need to scroll down the page, and later on their profile, you have to check the box for what services they can provide. These are called the can provides. If you want them to be able to log services for behavior, you need to check the box that they can provide behavior services. And on this profile is a place to upload, to add additional information or documentation showing that they're certified to provide behavior. Then double check the student's IEP, make sure they actually have those services prescribed. If they don't, the provider will not be able to log it. And double check the caseload, make sure that the caseload matches up with that service provider. So these are just tips for troubleshooting in this scenario that is quite common at the beginning of the school year. Okay, password reset. Speaking of data privacy, OSSE has decided, or OSSE receives a large number of requests for help resetting passwords because people lock themselves out of SEDS. You in your role, if you have not already experienced this, will also experience dozens of staff members running to you crying, saying, I have an IEP meeting tomorrow and I can't get into SEDS. Help me, help me, help me. Well, they can reset their own password, but only if they have certain things in place. So go double check their user profiles. Make sure they have a valid email address. You'd be surprised how many SEDS users in their profile page actually do not have a valid email address put there. You can edit that. They can edit it themselves under their My Info page. OSSE now has a policy when we create a SEDS account at the state level for non-publics, we always put in their email address. But for some reason, a POC that preceded you a few years ago might not have included an email address when they set up an account. So if the user clicks the forgot your password link, it's not going to help them because there's no email that the SED system can send something to help them reset the password. Additionally, you have to have a security question. Users don't automatically do this, but they need to have a forgot my password question, like what is your mother's maiden name or one of those. They can set those up. You cannot do that for them. They have to set that up themselves on their user profile page. Now, to take a quick glance to see who doesn't have an email, if I were you, I would just pull up your entire list of users, kind of like you did when you tried to see who to inactivate. Glance at the far right column and just see who doesn't have an email, and then take care of it. Now, non-publics. A note about non-publics at the bottom of the slide. Never, ever, ever, ever reset a password for a non-public user. Technically, you have the power to do this, but this needs to be done at the aggregate account level. Only OSSE can do this because they have access to multiple LEAs SED sites. If you reset the password for your site, it's not going to reset it for all the other LEAs that they serve. And now they have two different passwords and have to use two different login pages. It gets too crazy. So always redirect the non-public users to OSSE if they are locked out of their SEDS aggregate accounts. Speaking of password reset, OSSE realizes that it's strange that the SED system does not automatically force you to put in an email and a security question when you're a new user in SEDS. So we are going to update SEDS to make it so it forces everybody to have a current email in their user profile and a current password and a current security question. So this is going to be a universal password reset for everybody, for LEA users, non-public users, OSSE users. It's for everybody. Now, don't freak out. It's actually going to be pretty straightforward and pretty intuitive. This is what's going to happen. On October 20th, which is a Friday, SEDS is going to go offline for an update, and what it's going to do is make everybody's password expire. So then when you go to log in the next time, when you log in, it's going to say, hey, your password has expired. And it's going to prompt you to reset that password. It's going to have you agree to user terms and conditions. That's just you checking a box saying you agree with like data privacy as you have access to SEDS. It's going to prompt you to set up a new security question and to verify or put in your email address. So this is OSSE's way of doing sort of housekeeping, house cleaning at the beginning of the year, making sure that there's not people out there that can still get into SEDS, because we're just going to reset. We're going to make everybody have to reset their password. Additionally, forcing people to put in their email in the security question is going to make it so that everybody can reset their own password if they forget it in the future. You know how you have that warning when you try to log in, it says 2 failed attempts, 3 failed attempts, and it gives you that warning that if you fail 5 times trying to log in, it will lock you out. Hopefully, your staff will not try 5 times, and after 4 times, they will give up and click the forgot my password link, and they will be able to reset their own password, and they will never have to come ask you to reset it, even though you will still have that ability. And we will give you more reminders and a step-by-step with pictures guide on how to handle this universal password reset on October 20th. As the time gets closer, you have that guide to share with your SEDS users who you think might be a little confused by this process. Great, let's talk about transferring student records. This applies to students who are coming from another LEA that are now starting with your school, either at the beginning of the school year or partway through the school year at any time. So, first want to remind you that SEDS is a downstream system. What your registrar or data manager puts into your student information system at your LEA, whether you have PowerSchool or eSchool Plus or whatever product you use for your information system, that information, if it's not correct, is going to affect what is in SEDS or what does not make it to SEDS. So it always starts with having correct data in the student information system, and that's where you need to have a good relationship with your registrar or data manager at your LEA. Then it flows over to OSSE, to the ADT, then the SLED, and then it gets put over to SEDS. This is just basic enrollment information. And SLED and SEDS, they get together every night and hang out. They talk every night. They share data, and SLED will say, oh, I've got another student for you at your new LEA. And SEDS says, okay, great. I will put that student in my system. However, every student always starts out with a white check mark. Students that do have IEPs will actually look like a general education student at first, because remember, it's just enrollment information coming through the system from your registrar. So that enrollment information puts the student in the SEDS account, and now an additional step needs to happen before those sensitive special education records come over into the SEDS system and turns that student from a general ed into a special ed with a green check mark. Hopefully a green check mark, not a red stop sign. If it is a red stop sign, obviously it's not your fault because they came from another LEA, but it does mean you need to act fast to get the student into compliance. Okay, so here's the stages of enrollment. Don't feel overwhelmed. You are not the enrollment person at your school. You're not the data manager. Hopefully, some of you actually might be. I just want to make you aware of the stages of enrollment so you know how it impacts your ability to see the student's special ed records in your SEDS account. Because you're going to see the student there with a white check mark and not realize that they actually are a special ed student, and you need to get ready to serve them and implement their IEP. So what happens is OSSE is not going to transfer over those sensitive student records until we know for certain that that student is going to attend your LEA, meaning stage 5 enrollment. Stage 5 is when the student physically shows up at your school, so they're enrolled in your system, and now they have physically shown up to your school to attend. And now in OSSE, when they reach that stage, when your registrar marks them as attending, then OSSE is comfortable sending over those sensitive special education records. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute, I need these records before the first day of school when the student shows up so that I can plan ahead. That is correct. That is why Stage 4 exists. Stage 4 is a stage where a student can meet certain criteria to where OSSE feels comfortable enough to go ahead and send those sensitive student records over to your SEDS account. So let's look at that a little closer. So again, stage 5, if the student is actually now attending your LEA, OSSE will go ahead and initiate that transfer. A transfer means we are taking the special ed records in SEDS at the old IEP and moving them over to the SEDS account for the new LEA. Again, this is not enrollment information. That's already in SEDS with the white check mark. This is special ed records, and OSSE has to manually switch that over. So we will do that once the student is in stage 5 enrollment, and it will take it will take a day for the system to update before you can see them. However, if school has not yet started or the student has not yet shown up, but they are in stage 4 enrollment, meaning they got accepted to your LEA, the parent filled out the paperwork, the school accepted the student and got them all logged into their enrollment system. This is stage 4. They haven't shown up yet. If your LEA belongs to my school,
the whole party. That's what I did the last.
If your school belongs to My School DC, which is that common lottery application, there is sufficient documentation there from the parent, and when the parent in that system says, yes, I'm going to have my student attend this LEA, that is enough documentation and confirmation from the parent for OSSE to go ahead and push those records over. However, if you're, but this is after your student has shown up in your SEDS account with a white check mark with their enrollment information. And that means everything went smoothly with your registrar in the student information system. If there's a conflict, if the My School DC is showing a different LEA than where they're enrolled with you, if there's a conflict, OSSE is going to wait before they push those records over. Or if your LEA does not participate in My School DC, then OSSE is going to wait to transfer those until you request them. You can immediately request them using the OSSE support tool. I'll show you how to do that. So you don't have to wait around. If the student is enrolled with you but has not yet shown up, and you know they're coming, you can go ahead and request for OSSE to push those records over. Or if you do not reach out and request it, or if the former LEA is lazy and not paying attention and they don't approve your request to transfer them, OSSE will go ahead and push those records over on the 4th business day of the student remaining in the Stage 4 category. Now, if a student is enrolled in 2 different LEAs, which does happen, it's called duplicative enrollment because sometimes parents enroll their students in multiple places, kind of hedging their bets, then OSSE will follow the rule of sending the records over to the LEA who most recently registered the student. Now, I know this can be a little overwhelming because you're not the enrollment POC, but I just want to make you aware of the process by which OSSE pushes those SEDS records over for your special ed students after they are enrolled with you. Now, this is the situation where you would go manually request the information yourself. If OSSE does not push them over, then in the OSSE support tool, there's a button you can use to go ahead and request those records. And a list of students should actually appear here. It's updated every day. If what the OSSE support tool does is it goes and looks and sees who's enrolled in your SEDS, but whose special ed records are somewhere else. And it will put that report, if there's that conflict, it'll put those students, populate them here automatically to make it easy for you to request them. If you have any questions about this process, please reach out to us through the OSSE support tool. Okay, now we're going to talk about updates to SEDS. Now, for a brief overview, we're going to look at these in a little bit more detail, but not spend too much time today because they are minor changes. Here is the list of the changes that were made. And again, these are all to improve user functionality, make it more user-friendly. This is not changing the way things work with the IEP process or the evaluation process or any of those tasks or processes that you do in SEDS. Nothing substantive has changed. Again, these are minor changes to make SEDS more user-friendly, and I just want to point them out to you today. So let's go ahead and look at that. If you have not already done so, there is a PDF document in your toolbar, your GoToWebinar little toolbar up in the corner. Under handouts, there's a PDF document that's called Summer Updates to SEDS. You can open that up and follow along. I'm going to show it on my screen right now, but just know you can download that and have that with you today. So the document looks like this. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go through this just for a few minutes because you can review this in greater detail later. Just want to make you aware. Some of these changes have already occurred over the summer. You may have noticed them already if you used SEDS a lot this summer. And then there are a few changes at the end of the document that are coming soon. And again, these are all minor changes to make it more user-friendly. The first thing we have for you is batch printing. If you need to print a whole bunch of documents for one student, you can now print them all in one big batch by checking the boxes. There's a new batch column on this. This is on the student's document page on the Documents tab. Again, this is for a specific student. If you need to print a bunch of their documents, you can print them all at once. Also, the student history page. Student history page is that page that says everything that happened, and it has it highlighted green for the most current IEP or orange for the most current evaluation. You can actually export what's on the history page into a chart, a PDF chart, so that if you need to share it with somebody, like for example the parent or another staff member, if you want to give them, this is a nice snapshot to show what's happened to the student in the history of them being referred to and in special education. Again, that's just another nice new feature to make it more user-friendly. Also, on your home page, a year or so ago, they put all these cool new widgets on your homepage to make it more user-friendly. Now, some of these widgets are actually clickable in a way that it will take you directly to lists of students. So, for example, you can actually sort your caseload now by school campus. For those of you that oversee multiple campuses, this will be very useful for you to, you can just click on one of your school names and it will open up a list of students either on your caseload or that you have access to at that campus. So it's a new feature. Also, the compliance widget is going to be updated so that when you click, now this one may not have been implemented yet, but it is coming. You can click on a compliance color, either for eligibility or IEP, and it will show you all the students in that category. So here's an example. Again, this is fake student data. I'm not showing you any real data here. I clicked on the red bar graph for eligibility, and it shows all the students on my caseload who are out of compliance for eligibility. So again, this is just making it user-friendly and easier to access students directly in SEDS. The next feature is the freeze frame feature. On the student history page and the student document page, if they're really long, the header row will freeze. So if you scroll down very far on the page, you will still be able to see what each column is. Again, minor changes to make your life easier when you're using SEDS. Here's another one. The start and end date of a student's IEP now appears on the service logging page. This will help service providers be aware of if they're providing a service perhaps for an IEP that actually ended or for a new IEP and the service hours might have changed. This is just a quick reference point for the service provider to see the IEP start and end dates. We also have an update to the progress reporting wizard. If you have a lot of students on your caseload, you will actually be able to sort those students by school or grade in the progress reporting wizard so that you don't have to scroll through long lists of students to figure out who you want to do progress reports for. And again, this is just a feature that will help those of you or those of your staff that have really long lists of students on their caseload. Now this one's for you. As the special ed POC, if you didn't already know this, you can put messages on the message board on the main menu for everybody who logs into your LEA's SEDS site. This can be a very useful tool for you to give reminders to your staff. You can put inspirational quotes, reminders, things like that. So you can just go nuts with this. There can be up to 9 messages that scroll through on the main menu page. Now, OSSE is always going to have a message on the first one. So out of the 9, you can do whatever you want with 8 of those 9, but please do not change the first message, because OSSE likes to use that to send messages to everybody, especially if there's going to be like a SEDS outage or things like that. But then you can create messages in rich text format for all the other ones, up to 9. You don't have to do this. This is just a feature, hopefully, to help you as the POC in getting information to your staff. The next feature is a caseload link, where up on the blue bar, the main menu toolbar at the top, people with caseloads can directly access their caseload without having to do a student search. And it's now easier to search for students using the advanced student search field. We have added more filters. Now, previously, you could search for student by grade level, but it was a drop-down tab, so you could only choose one grade level at a time. Now you can select as many grade levels as you would like to filter your student search. You can also filter by date of birth, placement, or serving school, or the next school if that is applicable, if they're going to go to a different school. And again, this is all in the advanced student search page. Also, this one's not new, but we want to remind you that you can search for a student simply by typing their name in the search box at the top of your SEDS page. If you just type in like a last name, it will actually bring up all the students that match that last name. So here's an example where I typed in the last name of Tester, and all these students with the last name of Tester, with the first or last name of Tester popped up. However, if you try to type in a middle name, USI, etc., it's going to give you an error. So this student search function works for a first or last name or first and last name search. Now, these are changes that are coming soon, but not yet implemented. And in each monthly webinar, I will give you updates for what has changed in SEDS, if anything at all. So we are going to add the feature where you can rename documents on the, so people have been confused. On the main menu page, there's more generic resource documents. Sometimes that is confused with a student's individual documents tab. So we're just going to rename the tab to make it less confusing. We're also going to let you access reports directly from your menu bar instead of having to go through the school system tab. And we're going to sort the reports into categories on the reports tab to help you better understand what the purpose of those reports are. And it will still be filtered, so only users with the right access will be able to access certain reports. That level of access to reports will not change for any of the user types. They'll just be organized on the reports page in a better way. And there's a little feature now when you hover over a report, it will give you a brief description of the report. Because sometimes you see a list of reports, you're not sure what report is for what or what it can do for you, if it would even be useful for you to generate that report. So there will be a pop-up box to give you a little more information about that type of report. And that is the end of the changes to SEDS that have happened. As you can see, they are pretty minor and just to make it more user-friendly. But if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us through the OSSE support tool or through our training team email, which I will share with you. Okay, we have 17 minutes left, so we need to get through the rest of our content. Here we go. This section, you need to take this information and please, please, please pass it on to all of your related service providers. Related service providers, especially new providers, often have a hard time understanding what they're supposed to type in to a service log and what order they're supposed to do things in.
Or the service provider. Right.
So we have here, I'm looking, this is the view that a service provider would have when they go to their Wizards tab. There's a whole bunch of things they can do here. They can set up their caseload. And so the order that you would do things, it's backwards how it's listed there, because first you're going to log a service within 5 business days of providing that service. Then at some point you're going to generate a service tracker, which is a PDF document, a legal document that can show a bunch of service logs on the same page. Generating that service tracker is how a service provider, quote unquote, signs off that they've done these services. It's like their electronic signature that they have done those services. And that service tracker, it's not the same thing as the service log. The log is where they type in the information, which looks like this. The tracker is where they generate a PDF document. It's pretty common for an LEA to have service providers generate a service tracker at the end of each month, for example, but you can also have them do it more frequently. And then it puts all the logs from that month or week or whatever date range, puts them all on the same page. Now, the service tracker is a document that does have a signature place at the bottom. We used to require service providers to print off the tracker, physically sign it, and fax it back into SEDS. That is no longer required at the state level. You can just, simply by them generating the tracker and having it as a PDF in their SEDS account, that constitutes an electronic signature by the service provider that they have provided those services. And that's what our Medicaid team looks at, and our billing team for non-publics. Then the progress reporting wizard is what you would do at the end of each progress reporting period. So let's talk about the service log. This is where the service provider could go wrong if they're not careful. So please feel free to share these slides with them, or to give them a little training for a few minutes or something, because it can be a little confusing if you've never used this log feature before. This is when a service actually happened. This is a delivered service log. So a student showed up for their speech session, they got 30 minutes, now you're going to log it. So it's a direct service, and it was delivered. That is the delivery type. You should never select attempted or not attempted if the service was actually delivered as scheduled. Then you can, we encourage you to have your providers type notes about the session, just to provide a little more detail. Whatever notes they type in the comments box will show up on the service tracker, so that others will be able to see those notes who are looking at the service tracker. And then you can select group size. If you give services to a group of 3 students, you still have to fill out an individual service log for each student. And there is a group logging feature to make it easy to do that, but you still do need the individual log for each student. And again, you might know all of this, but think about your brand new service providers at your LEA. They might not actually know this, so you need to provide them some training. Now let's talk about missed services. When a service is missed, you still need to log what should have happened. You need to document that a service that was scheduled to happen did not happen, and why. And this is documentation to show that the provider was available to provide the service, but the student was absent or unavailable. Or in another situation, maybe the provider was not available, and so then it was not attempted. So please never put 0 minutes for a missed service log. I know some providers might think, oh, well, if the service was missed, that's 0 minutes, right? But no, that's not how this log is used. Think of filling out this log to document what should have happened but was missed. So in this case, the student did not show up for their 30-minute speech session, so I still put 30 minutes because I'm documenting that that was attempted, but that the student was absent. And for group size, you're no longer able to select 0. I know in the past we've told you that it's okay to select 0 when you're logging a missed service, but that feature is no longer available because many people were selecting 0 as the group size when a service was actually delivered, and that really messed up things for Medicaid billing. So for group size, you should select the group size that would have occurred if the student did show up for their services. So again, a missed service log is all about documenting what should have happened. The number of minutes, the group size, the type of service. Please, please, please type notes in the comments box about why the service was missed, because then people will be able to see these notes on the service tracker. So it always helps to document here. So please train your providers about this. Then, once a provider logs something, once they hit submit on this page, they get one more chance to verify that the service they logged is accurate. They get to take one last look at it before they permanently log it, because once they permanently log it, they cannot undo it. Only you can delete an incorrect service log, and they have to make that request to you, and then you have to go in the system and fix it, and they have to create the correct log. So hopefully they're taking a moment to look this over and make sure they didn't accidentally type in 300 minutes instead of 30 minutes due to fat fingers or something like that. And if it is wrong, they can go back and change it before it becomes a permanent record. Okay, child count. A few reminders as we're wrapping up today's webinar. Today is not a in-depth training on child count. That will come later. You may have attended the in-depth training on child count at the August 4th Start of School Summit. But if you did not, if you were not able to attend that, we do have a makeup session that will take place during next month's regularly scheduled LEA SPED POC monthly webinar on September 20th. So right now you are in the preparation phase. This timeline is posted in more detail on OSSE's website. This is just an overview for you. Right now is the preparation phase. Anything you can do right now to make sure all IEPs are accurate for service hours and disability type and whether or not they need a dedicated aide, things like that. Anything you can do right now to make sure those IEPs are accurate or to amend the IEP if necessary will save you a lot of time and headache later in the child count process after October 5th when the data is frozen that OSSE goes and starts digging through. So now is the preparation phase. And again in September we will have a webinar that digs much deeper into child count. But right now this is just a reminder, and as part of this preparation, here are tips. You should go look at the Unified Data Errors list in CLIC on a daily basis. If you do not have access to CLIC, I will tell you how to get that on the next slide. You need to work with your data manager and make sure students' enrollment information is accurate. So even if you have their IEP correct, if their enrollment information is messed up in your information system, that will also affect child count and cause a headache for you. So check your accuracy now. And again, a reminder to update the IEPs. And I'm going to show you on the next slide the most common mistakes on IEPs that cause headaches for child count. And amend those IEPs if needed. You can always send questions to the OSSE support tool about child count at any time during the process. We have a full team here at OSSE focused on child count that can help address your questions. And again, participate in next month's deep dive training webinar if you did not already do so, or if you'd like a refresher. So here are the 3 most common IEP amendments that need to be made for child count. These are based on the 3 most common errors, the data errors that LEAs get flagged for that they have to go fix after October 5th. So we ask you to do this. Train your case managers and your special ed coordinators to do this now so that it's not a headache after October 5th. SEDS has, our SEDS system, it's not perfect. We can all agree on that. It does have flaws. It does have some weaknesses, and here's one of them. SEDS does not automatically change the radio button to select the LRE placement category, that percentage. It doesn't automatically change that when you change the hours of services that a student is inside or outside the classroom. Here's an example. So you have to actually manually change this as part of the IEP process. And many case managers or SECs don't realize this, and they just keep it moving in the IEP process, and then later it's an error on child count. So please flag this for all of your SECs. If you see here this example, the first row says that on the previous IEP, the student was in category B, 21 to 60%. And then 7.2% is the new percentage of hours outside the classroom. That percentage is automatically calculated from whatever services were assigned as part of the IEP process. However, SEDS does not then change what button is selected in the LRE category. Whoever's doing the IEP process needs to manually click the correct radio button to match the percentage that's listed right above it. In this case, you can see it defaulted to what was on the last IEP, and you would need to go manually select the A button to match the percentage of the new IEP. Again, this is the most common error that makes people have to amend IEPs later on, which is, no one likes to have to amend IEPs. So the other 2 frequent data errors is the setting frequency and length of services and also information about whether or not they have a dedicated aide. These things are all part of the data that we look at for child count. So ensuring data accuracy now will definitely save you time later. Okay, and again, a reminder, you do not have to have a meeting to amend the IEP, especially for something small like this where you're fixing a mistake on the IEP. I definitely recommend just amending it using the documented written agreement modality, which you can read more about in the policy. But of course, if a parent wants to meet, then you have to honor the request to have a meeting when amending the IEP. Okay, we are wrapping up the last 5 minutes of the webinar with some announcements and reminders, and then we will stay on the line afterwards to address additional questions. So, as a reminder, you need to be listed as the official LEA SE POC in eSchool Plus, and your data manager is the only person that can do that. And I know I've sent reminders to you about this before, but this is a list that OSSE uses when they need to communicate directly with certain POCs, such as the head of school, or the data manager, or the English learner point of contact, or the enrollment point of contact. You are the special ed point of contact, and I need to be able to see your name and your valid email in this list. I looked at the list this morning, and there's 3 of you who have your name in the list, but then the email is blank or incomplete. So again, just double check with your data manager. You can always ask me. I can pull up the list and check to make sure you're on there. I'm happy to do that if you reach out to me. Because by you being listed as the LEA SE POC, that gives OSSE the green light to be able to give you access to sensitive student data when you request it. So here's the data systems that you need to have access to that you will be using this year. SEDS, of course. Make sure your user type is the data administrator so that you can do lots of things in SEDS as your role as the POC. You also will need access to enterprise reports, which has a few different types of special ed reports. And this access is granted when you have SLED access. You also need access to Click. You need a token to be able to log into Click, and once you get into Click, you need to have access specifically to these 3 applications: the RSMR, the Early Access app, and the Unified Data Errors app. The data errors is for child count to help you see what errors are already being flagged that you might need to fix. You need to have an account with the OSSE support tool so that you can reach out to us for help, and you need to have SLED login. Now, some of you might also be the TOTE administrator, like where you submit transportation requests in the TOTE QuickBase tool. If you are that person, here's how you get access. Otherwise, you can ignore that last one. Now, for any of these, if you don't have access and you're wondering why, you can email osse.dartraining, that's our data training team, except SLED has a different email and TOTE has a different email at the bottom of the page if you want access to those. Now, those of you coming to this Friday's training will receive introductory SLED training and Click training, which will allow you then to be given access. And we can set up a SEDS account for you at the training this Friday as well, or change your user type if you don't have it already. Okay, and just so you know, the OSSE Data Division has come up with a new way to support you this year. There's a specific staff member from the data division that is specifically assigned to each LEA that you can pick up the phone and call them, and they can give you help and support for any of these data systems. So this is good news for you as a SPED POC. You can literally pick up the phone and call or email a person at OSSE that is assigned to your LEA, and you can find that list published here. TOTE, again, if you are the transportation person, here are some resources to help you, a phone number and a quick start guide. If you are not already subscribed to the Look Forward, please subscribe to it. This is OSSE's main way of communicating with LEAs, and you as a POC are expected to review this newsletter every Wednesday when it gets emailed to you to see if there's anything relevant for special ed that you might need to flag for your staff or for yourself. It's also where we advertise professional development, etc. If you are not subscribed and don't get it every Wednesday afternoon, please go subscribe. You can also go look at all the past and current newsletters at this link here. And here is a little more information about the OSSE support tool. I'm not going to spend time on this, but you can reference this later if you are wondering how to get access to the support tool and the types of topics that you can use the support tool for to troubleshoot with OSSE or just to ask general questions. And here's the webpage where we will be archiving today's webinar recording, slide deck, and the SEDS update document. I will email this link to you later. Here is how you find out who's who at OSSE. And here is the Start of School website. If you missed the summit on August 4th or would like to access those materials, the link is at the bottom of this slide for how to get those materials. And again, a reminder that this Friday's training is open to all POCs, but is especially geared towards new POCs. And here is the agenda. Now, that concludes our webinar. Here is how you can get a hold of us for additional questions. Next webinar will be, again, the third Wednesday of every month during the school year. So September 20th is the third Wednesday of September. I will open up that webinar with a few brief reminders and announcements on SEDS and things like that, and then the child count team will use the rest of the hour to provide that child count deep dive training, which is a required training for you as the SPED POC. If you did not attend it on August 4th at the summit, you must participate in this one. And everyone else is invited to attend as a refresher, because by then you will be up to your neck in child count, and it might be helpful to ask questions and get a refresher of what you're supposed to do. Thank you for attending today. I am now going to stay on the line and chat with some of you, try to answer the questions that are outstanding, although my colleagues Leah and Rita have been very helpful today to answer your questions. And we hope you have a great start of school year. We'll see some of you on Friday, and the rest of you, reach out anytime. Thank you and have a wonderful week.